For these questions, you're going to solve each problem using the standard algorithm. An algorithm is just a set of memorized steps that will allow you to solve a problem. And this is the algorithm for long division. What we're going to be doing uses the same algorithm that we've been working with. It's just the number of times we go through the steps that changes. And that depends on the number of digits that will be in the quotient. The number of digits in the quotient will tell you the number of times you need to go through the steps to solve the problem. Okay, so for number 1, we have 35 divided by 2. Notice here that I have a representation of 35, but I have some red and some yellow. That's because the reds are going to have a value of 10 because they're in the tens place. So I have 10, 20, 30, and the yellows just have a value of 1, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. So we're going to have 2 rounds of the algorithm because we'll have 2 digits in our quotient. So let's start with the first one, the 3. Even though it has a value of 30, we're just going to think about them as 3 hearts worth 10 each. And we're going to divide them by 2. So I'm going to do my first step and divide the hearts into groups of 2. So I've divided. I'm going to write my answer right above the 3. I had 1 group of 2. Next is multiply. So I'm going to take this 1 I just wrote and multiply it by 2 to get to the number of hearts I was able to put in a full group. And now I'm going to subtract. I'm going to subtract 2 from 3 to find out the number of leftovers I have. I have 1 leftover 10. And there it is right there. The next step is to compare. I need to make sure that my difference is less than my divisor, and it is. So now I'm on the last step, the bring. So we've been bringing this answer up as a remainder, but I'm not quite done with the problem yet. So what I need to do instead is to bring down the 5. I'm going to make a straight arrow, and right underneath it, I'm going to write that 5. I just brought it down. What's really happening here is I still had this leftover one that wasn't in a group. So what I did is I took my leftover heart and wrote it with the 5 original ones. Instead of writing 1 heart worth 10, I went ahead and wrote 10 hearts. Okay, so now this is no longer here, it's over here. And if you count them up, I'll now have 15 hearts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So now I have 15 hearts that I'm going to divide in groups of 2. So now I'm starting round 2 of the algorithm. This time I'm going to be starting with 15 divided by 2. So my first step is going to be to divide 15 divided by 2. So I can just put them in groups of 2. Okay, and so now for the, right above the 5, I'm going to write my quotient. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I was able to make 7 groups. My next step is going to be to multiply. And remember, when I multiply, I'm going to take my number of groups and multiply it by the number of hearts in the group. So 7 times 2 is 14. And I'm going to write it right below. Okay, so now I've multiplied. And next is subtract. I had 15 hearts in all, but I was only able to group 14 of them. By subtracting, I'm finding the number of leftovers. So 15 minus 14 is 1. Okay, and we can see here that there was 1 left over. The next step is to compare, so I'm going to see if 1 is less than 2, and it is. And my last step is to bring it. There is nothing left to bring down, so now I'm going to bring this 1 right up here and leave it as my remainder. So 35 divided by 2 is 17, remainder 1. So let's look at number 2, 47 divided by 3. You're going to have to do 2 rounds because the quotient is going to have 2 digits. Notice I turned some notebook paper sideways right here. And that's because if you do that, you can keep these nice straight columns and it'll help you keep your numbers organized. So I'm going to do number 2 on some notebook paper turned sideways. I also included the algorithm steps twice because I'm going to check them off as I do them. So for number 2, I'm just going to rewrite 47 divided by 3. I'm putting 1 digit in each column. Okay, so for round 1, I'm going to start with the 4, and I'm going to ask myself, what is 4 divided by 3? Well, the answer is 1, so I'm going to write the answer right up here. So I have divided. My next step is to multiply. I'm going to multiply 1 times 3, and the answer is going to be 3, and I'll write it right in the same line, all lined up. My next step is to subtract to find the remainder. So I'm going to do 4 minus 3, and I'm going to get a 1. The next step is to compare. I'm going to compare and make sure this 1 is less than 3, and it is. And my last step is to bring. So I'm either going to bring down the next digit or bring it up as a remainder. And since I have another digit, I'm going to be bringing down the next digit. So now my new dividend is going to be 17. So for round 2, I'm going to start with dividing 17 divided by 3. So 17 divided by 3 is 5. And I'm going to write my 5 right above the 7. My next step is to multiply. So I'm going to take this 5 and multiply it by 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. And I'm going to write it right below the 17. The next step is to subtract. So I'm going to do 17 minus 15. Okay. My next step is going to be compare. I'm going to make sure the 2 is less than the 3, and it is. So my last step is going to be to bring down. Well, there is nothing to bring down, so I'm going to bring this 2 up as the remainder. So the answer is 15 remainder 2. All right, let's do one more example together. This time we'll do 185 divided by 9. It looks like a 3-digit number, but it really is only going to be 2 rounds because 9 isn't going to go into 1. So the 8 is going to be the first round of the algorithm and the 5 would be the second round. So let's do that together. So I'm first going to write it down. Notice I'm using that notebook paper to keep it all lined up, putting 1 digit in each column. Okay, so I'm not going to even look at the 1 because 1 can't be divided by 9. So for this problem, I'm going to start with the number 18. And I'm going to do 18 divided by 9. So 18 divided by 9 is 2. So I'll write my answer right up there, and I've done my first step of division. Next is multiplication. So I'm going to take that 2 and multiply it by the divisor. So 2 times 9 is 18, and write it right underneath. The next is to subtract. So 18 minus 18 is 0. Now I'm going to compare, make sure it is less than the divisor. And last step is to bring down. There is another digit in the dividend to bring down, so I'm going to make a nice straight arrow and write my 5 next door to the 0. So I've done all the steps for round 1. Now I'm going to go and start on round 2. So for round 2, my dividend is going to be 5. There wasn't a remainder to make this number bigger, so it's just going to be 5. So I'm going to start with 5 divided by 9. Well, 5 can't be divided by 9, so I'm just going to put the answer 0. Next is multiply, so I'm going to take that 0 and multiply it by the 9, and my answer will be 0, which I'm going to write right underneath the 5. Next, I'm going to subtract, so I have 5 minus 0. It's going to be 5. I'm going to compare and make sure it is less than the divisor, which it is. And the last step is to bring it. There's nothing to bring down, and so I'm going to bring it right up as my remainder. So for number 3, the answer is going to be 20, remainder 5. So you do the rest on your own, and if you need help, just come back and rewatch the video. Good luck!